Whoa. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Happy Sabbath. Man, we get out of pocket for a
Happy
minute
Sabbath.
and stuff goes crazy, man.
Mercy.
Our little intro video is disappeared, and so we ended up going
Wow.
twice on that thing around. But hey, we see some folk in the chat. We want to say hello to Dr. Henry. Who are we seeing in the chat today, Doc?
Listen, we see Roger Wade's mother, I think, in the chat. Am I right?
Yeah, she's
And
there.
we want to
She's
say
there.
happy Sabbath to you too from the
Yes.
happy
and-
Sabbath
Mom,
to
it's
the
good to
twin
have you.
island of Trinidad and Tobago.
Listen, she already sent me a text. What y'all talking about today? I said, wait, you're gonna have to wait and see.
Oh, that's it. That's it.
So we see Myrna Harris. I think I said that right. Myrna Harris.
Yes.
Our dear friend, our super supporter, Cindy Paul. We all know who that is. So good to have you with us. We had a great time seeing her this week at PELC. Donnell live from Pennsylvania. Don, what happened? What's going on? And Rebecca Boney is with us again today, and Karita Phillips. I know these are our regulars. Put in the chat where you are looking at us from. Rebecca is in Atlanta. We know that Cindy's there in South Florida, in the Fort Lauderdale area. Karita, I'm not sure where you are right now, so you may want to share with us where you are. And we already know where my mom is looking at us from, the Twin Island of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, yes, yes. So not only do we want to know where you are watching from, there's one other thing that we need you to do today, right at the beginning, because we're getting ready to have a conversation that you do not want to miss. You do not want your pastor to miss. You don't want any of your church leaders to miss. So Dr. Henry, what do we need him to do, Doc?
Hey, listen, this is the time to share. This is the time that you want to make sure that all of your friends get the gift that you're getting. So share, and then share.
That's right. Tag somebody, share somebody. And listen, one of the ways that you can share, this is an easy way. We've started learning about Facebook and YouTube, the algorithm. I used to say a logarithm, but my wife told me that I wasn't saying it right. So it's not an algorithm, it's an algorithm. That if you just hit that thumbs up button, it's going to help make this feed show up, more likely to show up in somebody else's feed without you even having to tag them. So if you're on Facebook, YouTube, interact with that little thumbs up button or any of those little those emojis there. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and hit that thing there too, and it will do the same. Gentlemen, it's good to it's not as good to be back. We were together just about a few days ago.
That's
we were
right.
sitting together in Huntsville, Alabama at the annual Pastoral Evangelism and Leadership Conference. What was that like, guys? How'd it go?
Oh man, what a blessing it was. Listen, Pastor Wade was working. Like this man was sitting there. Let me tell you something about Pastor Wade. This man is a worker.
Mercy.
He was putting
Mercy.
together the behind the scenes of the PELC Pastor Evangelism Leadership Conference. And then he was also able to spend some time with us on PRT. And so we actually, was able to talk and co-host with some of the other hosts that were there as well. Barone Savory and Richard Martin. These guys are phenomenal, by the way.
They did an awesome job.
They know how to do this thing. So we had a good time there in Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah.
Yes, it truly was great to see both of you in the same room, literally in the same room. And we were able to reach each other. You know, what was interesting, I looked at the replay of what we did, and although we sit in these particular spots where I am on your right, Anselm, and Dr. Henry's on your left, when we were in the room, I was in the middle.
That's right.
You see, the beauty of software, we can put ourselves wherever we want to be in eCam. So it was an awesome, wonderful experience to hang and to listen and to share and to iron sharpens iron. We learned a lot from each other. We tried out new technology. We did quite a few things while we were there in Huntsville.
That's right. That's
right.
right.
We did a lot of things.
What was your standout moment, Dr. Henry, and Raj from PELC this year?
Listen, every year that I go to PELC, I enjoy the preaching of the word. I enjoy the workshops. This year, I tell you what, the standout moment, man, was us. Being together with you guys, man. I
Oh,
listen. I appreciate being together with you. But aside from that, let me tell you something. The word was preached. I mean,
mercy.
my
Yes, it
goodness, every
was.
word was coming with it. I mean, Pastor Chandler, I mean, Pastor Stoddard, I mean, yeah, we could go on and on.
Yeah.
So the word of God
Mm.
was preached. I really appreciate it, especially that door, man. Hey, keep on painting. Keep on painting.
Yeah.
Those of you that went to PELC, keep on painting, man. That's a powerful word he preached.
Yes, yes, yes. I have to agree with Dr. Henry. It was actually being able to be with my brothers on screen here again. We don't do it often enough, but it was good. The second standout moment was the sermons. Not
Yeah.
even just one sermon. Each sermon had everything we needed each time. It was food for the soul. It was a blessing. And guess
Yes.
what? If you did not get an opportunity to participate in PELC this year, you can still be a part of that. You can go to PELC Power and register and sign up for the PELC this year, and you'll have access to all of the material, even as we speak right now. So you can get in on what we got in on.
Awesome. All right, so that was last. Actually, what did we do last week? We talked about PELC last week. We had Dr. Jesse Wilson
week, right?
was our guest last week. We did have a little mix up with our stream. If you missed last week's conversation, we're gonna have. Do we have that up yet?
It was fixed. It was fixed.
Okay. All right.
We linked it. We linked
Perfect.
it.
All right. Well, good. Which
We
brings
want to
us.
thank TJ for that. We'll
Yes,
thank TJ for
TJ.
that.
TJ, right. And also
it happened.
Yes, listen,
we got to meet Stephanie Scott last. I'm sorry,
yes,
Dr. Henry.
Yes.
Henry.
Oh, no. Go ahead, man. Listen, Stephanie, praise God. We got to have Stephanie on the show. She is in tune with the Pastors Roundtable, man. So we got to have her on, definitely.
Yeah,
listen,
HR.
I do want to say this. I want to say this, gentlemen. We definitely want to pray for those who are in the storm path.
Yes.
We know that yesterday some storms, the tornadoes hit down there in a few places, and our hearts go out to those who have lost loved ones. This is definitely a difficult time, so we're going to be praying for you. I think even your area, Pastor Wade, you've been impacted a little bit by the storm as well. By these storms.
I was awoken at 3:00 this morning, and my family and I ran downstairs to the closet.
Wow.
And we listened to the news and waited for the all clear. There was a tree in my front yard that's not there anymore, and the gate to my backyard is totally laying on the floor. Come on now, did I not rhyme? Come on.
Wow.
And we give God praise
Yeah.
for sparing our lives. The churches in Kentucky were most affected, but when we spoke with all of the pastors in the affected areas, they shared with us there was no loss of life. Everyone seems to be okay at this point. But the cities in which and the communities in which we worship in, they were hit hard, especially Mayfield, Kentucky, and Bremer, Kentucky, just totally flattened. There were industries that was working on last night totally flattened. They lost. They don't know how many people are missing, so they're still trying to find those folks. And so right now they think probably over 100 plus folks have been affected by loss of life in the Kentucky area. So let's keep Kentucky in prayer.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we've got our guest is waiting in the wings. Our audience is anxious to hear from our guest. Before we bring our guest on, let's tell everybody what's on the table today. Roger, Dion, which one do you want to take a stab at?
I can start. When we started out in planning for our shows, one of the things we wanted to do was kind of help in defining how the church operates. And we kind of pulled together a series of opportunities to talk about different aspects of how the church operates, how the church is led. And so today we're going to be talking about leadership. And we felt that it was only proper that we ask the leadership guru, I like to call him, the leadership guru, to come and share with us on church leaderships in particular, but leadership overall. And so we're excited to have with us. I'm gonna pass the baton to Dr. Henry to share with us who is at the table today.
All right, that's what's
All
on the
right.
table. Dr. Henry, who's at the table today, sir?
Well, listen, man, we looked far and wide, high and low, man, to find somebody to come on to this program today. And we got somebody who knows about leadership, who has demonstrated over and over again that God has gifted him in this area. And so we have none other than Pastor Freddie Russell. That's right. The Freddie Russell. Let me tell you something. We look up to his ministry. We have learned from him, and God has really, truly given us a treat here today to have him on our program.
Hey, well, let's bring him on screen. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, the inimitable pastor, doctor, bishop, guru, Freddie Russell, Fredrick Russell. So happy to have you with us today, Doc. Thank you so much for agreeing to sit with us on the Pastor's Roundtable today.
Well, thank you, Roger, Anselm, and Dion. I've never been called inimitable before. This is a first, and I'm so.
As soon as we sign off, I'm gonna go and look it up. Well, listen, Doc, normally what we do at this point, we're going to have a word of prayer, and then we're going to give you just a couple of seconds here to address the audience, greet the audience, anything that you'd like to say to them, share with them about where you are, what you're doing, what's going on with you. But let's go ahead and open with a word of prayer, and then we're going to hop right in. Pastor Wade, would you grace us with that word?
Let's pray. Father, once again, we are just so thankful that you allowed us another opportunity to gather in this space. Now, Lord, as we prepare to have this discussion, we pray, Father, that you will lead us and guide us. Be with those who are still trying to join, those who have already joined. They pray that they will gain a blessing in the information shared and the inspiration that is transmitted, is my prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 All right, Dr. Russell, we normally at this time, give our guests, because we normally have 2 or 3, we give them about 39.7 seconds to greet and address the audience. But since you are alone today, we're going to give you all the time that you want just to greet the audience, say hello, and give them just a little update on where you are and what you're doing.
Well, thank you. But first of all, just a joy to be with the Pastor's Roundtable. I have been hearing about this podcast for a little while now, and impressed with what I've been hearing. And it's really a joy to be here this afternoon. Like you all, I've been preaching all morning, so just trying to grab the voice here to make sure it's back with me again. So about 3 years ago, the Lord gave the open door for me to go out and to do leadership and team development full time. That was a major leap of faith for me, to step away from a regular paycheck, to step away from my comfort zone, and to jump into a world that I had only been episodically a part of, and that was beyond the church. And so right now, the Lord has blessed to start a company, as you referenced already, called the True North Leadership Group. And we work in 5 contexts: corporate, healthcare, government, academic, and religious settings. In fact, the company is in all 5 of those areas right now. And we do 6 things. We do leadership design and development. We build cohesive, high-performing teams, strategy facilitation, executive leadership coaching, change management, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and internal corporate conflict communication. So those are the areas we engage in right now, having a ball, having a blast. But for me, it's not just doing this. This is allowing me, like Paul, to experience Mars Hill and to carry the gospel in a way that heretofore I've never experienced it, doing it like I'm doing it now. So I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I'm enjoying how God is using me, at least uniquely in this season and this setting I'm in right now.
Wow.
Praise God.
Fascinating. That's a lot of stuff, Doc. That covers all the bases there. That's exciting. That's exciting.
Well, I'm inimitable.
Wow.
I'm inimitable.
Inimitable. There we go.
Inevitable.
There you go.
Hey, use it all you
right.
can, Doc. I don't know where else you
I'm
can
gonna
get
put
it.
it in my bio. My bio. That's coming
That's
in.
good. Well, let's jump right in. I know we got some questions.
Yeah, let's
yes,
get right
sir.
in.
Go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, let's get right in. As you know, Pastor Russell, it's not easy to give a one-size-fit-all definition for leadership. What would you say is a good definition or description of leadership? And then the next question to that is why leadership? You know, in this day and age when everyone wants to do whatever they want to do, why would we need a leader? Can you share, first of all, a definition, a good one, and why do we need leadership?
Well, the best definition I have found, and I've lived with the past 20 years, that I got from John Maxwell when I was a young pastor. In my 20s, I attended one of his conferences, and he defined leadership with this one-word definition: influence. That's what it is. And of course, having influence doesn't require that you be in the leadership chair with a leadership title, because sometimes the most powerful leader is the informal leader who didn't have the title, but they have the influence. And so, which is a great working definition. But I want to roll into that second question: why leadership? Because everything rises and falls on a solid leader. We know those disturbing words in the book of Judges, where everyone did what was right in their own eyes. There was no direction. They lost momentum. They were scattered as a people. But when a judge stood up to become leader of the nation, even though it may have been brief, there was a focus to what they were doing as a people. And so the why of leadership, if you want to get something done, you want to move forward, you got to have leadership that's there to bring it together. Without leadership, the opposite and the polar opposite of that is chaos.
Wow.
Interesting.
So you've just given us the importance of leadership, that if we don't have leadership, we will have chaos. But it's interesting that even when we have an established leader, we still see chaos. And so
right.
how
I was trying to figure out how to word that.
You know, how would you say then that helps? What maybe the question is, what kind of leader are you really speaking about? Or is it I think I've heard something where there are positional leaders and there are this kind of, other types of leaders. Is there a unique specific leader we ought to be looking towards that will help us to live up to the definition that you have shared, especially, and the why you have shared? And Roger, can I add something on the tail end of that? Because whenever I talk about leadership to my members and my people, I will always tell them, I've read tons of books on leadership, this leader and that leader, but the reality is that there's only one requirement to be a leader, and that's to have a follower. If you have a follower, then you're a leader. It doesn't mean that you're a good leader or a great leader, but you are leading as long as you have somebody following. So, and I think all of us here, we know, we all know leaders, but I think what we're really after is how do we become, or how do we identify great leaders?
Yeah, well, let me take the first part of that question first. In fact, I thought my original response was profound, so Roger knocked the left off. Okay, so let's keep it. But you're right. I do hold to the fact that without leadership, there's chaos. But even with a leader, if where it becomes troubled in the leadership context, you can also end up with chaos. It doesn't always mean it's the leader that's creating the chaos, but there's sometimes the leader does. And so the leader, I think, that brings at least stability, even when they're having to navigate chaos, is a leader who brings character to the table, a leader that brings not just eyesight, but wisdom and insight to the table as well. Ironically enough, one of the ways that and I'm going to come back to this question, but I want to come at it tangentially. One of the observations I've made in the last two funerals that I watch, I am a devotee of watching national funerals. I watched the one yesterday with Bob Dole at the National Cathedral in Washington. A few weeks ago, I watched the one with Colin Powell, and then, of course, the ones that have been coming on the last year or two. And each of those leaders face chaotic situations in their leadership. From Colin Powell with the UN disaster, when he was talking about that there's a nuclear material in Iraq, from Bob Dole with the presidential campaign, that he was the nominee for the Republican Party, and the John Lewis, the Martin King, they all face chaos. But there is the potential for order in that chaos arrives best if there's a leader who knows how to navigate it. But when you have a leader that is trouble, and I want to use this word selectively, and dysfunctional, or a low emotional intelligence, then you get the chaos on both sides, sometimes coming from the people and the leader, and that's when you're really over the top at that point.
Wow. Leading through a crisis. That's powerful stuff. You know how you do it. But let me ask you this. So, talking about leadership in general, in our church, we have leaders within our church, and in the different entities or segments of our structure. So I know that next year, we are going to have so many sessions taking place, and this is this is a strange time, right? Because of COVID and what it has done to our church. We have kind of shifted focus as far as our methodology, but still staying with mission, and it caused us to reevaluate a lot of the things that we're doing. So as we come talking about our denominational leaders, it could be from the pastors to the president, what are some of the professional traits that we should be expecting in this time?
I want to circle. That's a great question, DM. I want to circle back and hit hard that this essential trait, assuming that they are walkers and they know God, that clearest trait has to be character. You've got to bring that to the table, because you can bring all of the leadership guru information, all the books that are read. You have moved through the organization. You're punching the organizational tickets to move up. But if you don't have character, it's going to fudge out on you even more so the higher you go in an organization. That's central. Number two, I think, even more important than 20 years ago, the leader has to come with strong people skills, because leadership is 10% technical and 90% people. You can have all the technical skills, you can have the contextual skills, but if you can't lead through people and relating to people, you're in trouble. Here's the third that I just alluded to earlier, and that is emotional intelligence. I am becoming more and more convinced that if you have a low EQ or EI, depends on how you look, those terms are used interchangeably, you're going to have trouble in your organization. Emotional intelligence has to be with your own self-awareness. You're being able to think about what you're thinking about when it comes to yourself, how you impact others, and your ability to read others. But if you become a bull in the channel shop, or you are all in a overtly command and control type mindset with leadership, it's going to be a little more dicier to navigate, which means you have to have leaders who have the dexterity to use multiple leadership styles as the context, as the situation demands it. And so this need to have a great maturation, the ability to have some experience of having led in the past that brings you to this place. All of those are factors that's going to be requisite for leaders coming in this next session or next season of electing senior leaders. Also, the ability to have your hand on the pulse of your organization, and not bringing your biases to the table, but the ability to step off and to hear the people as opposed to trying to manipulate the outcome that you are hoping will be.
Wow.
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 You just said a lot there, Doc. You said a lot, man. I want you, and I know we got some other questions, and so, but I want you to unpackage this emotional intelligence. Unpackage that a little bit. Tell us, we know how to increase our IQ, right? I mean, read a little more, you know what I mean? Do more study, try to retain. But how do we increase that emotional intelligence?
Well, it's again a great question. Let me start with IQ first. IQ is about your cognitive abilities, and IQ can get you into a great school. IQ can allow you to do well academically, but your IQ caps out around 15 or 16 years old. It goes no further.
Wow.
EQ continues to evolve and to grow your entire life. So Daniel Goleman is probably the guru. When we'll be using guru a lot today, is the guru with EQ, and more employers are using EQ in order to hire. Wow. Because you bring a person in and they can crack up on you down the road, because not crack up, sort of going crazy or postal, but they don't really pan out because their EQ is so low. I was with a group of conference presidents last week in Florida, and one of the presentations I did was on emotional intelligence. And the thing I was putting forth, one of the criteria, outside of all of the many criteria we use to vet those who will be hired in ministry, is that the one that we've got to begin to do is to do some assessments on folks' EQ. Because a lot of the trouble that you're having with leaders is that EQ is so low. And we have not put around them that ability to grow that EQ, which must be driven by them, but at least the encouragement of it. And hopefully that will become central in our hiring practices as we go forward, because it's so critical to how a leader is going to perform in leadership.
So I want to push a little further on that, Dion. And sorry for jumping in here, but you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, because there's just some clarity there. The development of EQ. So number one, do we denominationally, institutionally, do we have resources? Are we intentional about developing EQ? And then I thought you said at the end of that the majority of that is on them, which sounded like it's the responsibility or of the individual to develop their own EQ. How does that develop? What does that look like? If I have a low EQ, how do I grow it? How do I get better at it? What's the ingredients of all of that? How do we change that circumstance if somebody has a low EQ?
Well, this is why I mentioned that ultimately it's driven by them, because that working definition of EQ is self-awareness. You can't always teach that. You're hoping that through the normal maturation process, that is going to happen. But you can give them feedback where they may have a blind spot with a part of the leadership or a part of themselves. You can give that feedback. So the question came to me on last week by a leader is that when you have a leader that has a low EQ, how can you help them? And what's happening across the country is that they are assigned coaches to help them to think it through, to help them to have a wider perspective on themselves, to give feedback where they may need coaching and turning the corner on some things. And most people will respond to that if they are not naturally self-aware. Every now and again, you have a leader that has moved through the organization where that is not the case. They have not learned from it. And the better thing for them that benefits them is to find a place out of leadership for them, because they ultimately will self-sabotage and destroy the very thing they're trying to lead.
Mercy. So let me 1 second. Let me ask this question, because what you're saying is very critical in terms of understanding the EQ and if for some reason, a person, well, in other words, my question is this: there isn't a direct path or a direct situation that will get you to say, "Hey, I've arrived at a good EQ." It's based on individuality. Is that what I'm hearing? Correct?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And again, that earlier statement that it keeps evolving over your life. Now, it's amazing,
Mm,
but that the older you get, in your 30s, 40s, and 50s, 60s, you become a lot more acute, even better with your self awareness than a leader that is just starting out. It's another word for it, as I mentioned earlier. It's a maturation process about you.
So
Mm.
let me add this too, and I know we got another question, but I just want to milk this as much as we can because I'm just curious. Typically when I hear or first heard the term EQ, emotional intelligence, what I imagine in my head was this is my ability this is a reference to my ability to be able to understand, assess somebody else's emotions and then to be able to respond or lead according to based on how they're feeling. So if I am an administrator and I walk into a place and I need to be able to ascertain or assess that morale is low. If I don't assess that, then to me that was saying that my emotional intelligence is not very good because I was always reading it as an individual's ability to assess or ascertain somebody else's emotion. And you think about it even in the home. When we think about it between husbands and wives, people will say, well, he doesn't have a very high emotional IQ. That's why his wife is always this way or that way, or et cetera. So is there any kind of a connection to the assessment of somebody else's emotions, or is it all just purely a self-awareness?
Yeah, well, as I referenced earlier, and a good question again, overwhelmingly, it's about your being to manage yourself, to look at not only how you operate, how you affect yourself, but how you come off is affecting those around you, and your ability to make the adjustments as needed to ensure optimal relational experiences with them. But the second part of EQ is your ability, as you referenced, the ability to read others' emotional cues as well, and to be able to respond to that. So if I'm walking into a room, as you referenced, and you're watching people who are tense in the room, or a couple that are tense, you're able to read their emotional language and able to adjust or to be sensitive to what is happening in that room and not blinded or not oblivious to what is happening. Or as you speak, you're able to read your impact on them and try to read it and make the needed adjustments as you can to assure optimal communication in that particular context.
Oh, wow. Wow. Good stuff.
And
Good
it's not
stuff.
that black and white though, because even if you make adjustments, folk also have to respond to that catalytic adjustment. But
right.
at least you're doing your part because you're able to have organizational meeting and people awareness of what's happening all around you at that moment. You're clued in and cued in to your environment.
Wow. Good. Good.
Wow. Wow.
So
I,
let's
I,
let.
I,
Oh, go ahead, Doc.
No, I was going to say, I know, Dr. Henry, there was an additional question there in terms of how members can help in speaking in terms of the pastoral role as leader. How can members help and not hinder this process? And I want to add that to the question that's in the chat. I think Cindy asked the question: how do you know your emotional EQ is evolving? Because you can, is it based on the feedback you're getting, or is there a assessment that can be given to help you see that you have grown in your EQ?
Oh yeah, there are EQ assessments. If you Google right now EQ assessment, a few free ones come up that you can
Hmm.
actually look at yourself. But those in a more professional range of universities and organizations sometimes are tapping into some that are a bit more complex in terms of what they're looking at. But EQ assessments are right there online right now. Just Google it, and it comes right up again.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So I want to segue. There was a comment that we made earlier, and I was trying to remember what it was, but it was a great segue into our next question. So as Dr. Henry was asking, what are the personal qualities that we're looking for in leaders going forward? Character was I think our takeaway from that. But when it comes to leaders in today's church, and we're talking about the local church level, the conference level, any denominational level, how politically aware? We were talking about being self-aware, but how politically aware should our leaders be? We have grown up, I think, in an age or in a church where politics in the church was a very negative term. And so it was helpful, I think, in your pursuit of anything to come off as if you were aloof to both church politics, and we have traditionally taken that same stance in many instances to cultural, to secular politics, that we want to remain aloof from those as well, because it makes us come across as more holy or more focused on spiritual things, not worldly things. But in reality, when the rubber hits the road in terms of making a difference and being transformational, how politically aware should church leaders be in both contexts, both politically aware in the church, and we may need to define that some, but also in the secular society at large?
Yeah, good question. Let's define politics first. In its purest form, politics is the art of getting things done, or the process of getting things done. That's what it is. And the moving pieces for that to happen. So there's nothing Machiavellian about it in its purest forms. Wow. There is nothing subversive about it in its purest form. It's the art of getting things done. So when you say how much should a leader be politically aware, I think leaders naturally need to be politically aware of what's happening around them, how it's getting done, the process, the mechanizations of that, especially in its purest forms. Where it becomes a little bit more pejorative is where you have leaders who don't bring character to the table. And they begin to use politics as a means to control, a means to subvert, a means to go around, a means to create an environment that becomes less than healthy.
But that only happens in secular politics, right? That's
only in secular politics. So the problem with immediately demeaning the word politics, it means that once you are assigned that term, at least in our faith community, then it becomes overtly pejorative. So let's say conference elections, if I could just go there. In the AME church, people openly say, I'm available to run, I'm interested in this job. Their bio is put out, their background is put out, and they openly state it. In the Adventist church, because we have a false humility, and so you cannot just say, I'm interested in this. You got to sort of get it out there in a subtle, covert way, and when people hear about it, well, he's just being political. He's running for the chair. Well, when you begin to use those terms, it just sullies everybody at that point. And so the circle back, a leader has to be politically aware, and how they use politics to get things done is okay, as long as it's not dirty, as long as you're not trying to intentionally harm people, as long as you're not trying to be in a controlling way of where you're trying to manipulate an outcome. That's when it becomes a little more precarious to do it in our environment.
So a good leader needs to be a good politician, right?
I want to use that. I don't want to use that word politician because that becomes a noun. I think a leader has to be politically aware of how to get things done. and allow that to go forth in an organization in the best way possible.
Okay.
Let me just add this before you go on, Pastor Paul. I mean, I like your definition of politics. It matches. We had a show about maybe 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, and they're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
That
everything is politics.
Just getting everything is politics. Just getting it done. Just getting something done. And I think a lot of times when we use this term politics in the church, as you have mentioned, it's kind of like no, that means dirty politics. That means it's not right. But in essence, no, we gotta get things done. We look at Nehemiah, we look at some people in the Word of God. I mean, they gotta get things done, and you get it done in a way where you're above board, you're using your influence, and you're not doing anything underhandedly. So I like what she said.
All right. So listen, this is not in the script. I'm going way off script right now. So my apologies, but I'm gonna call this a clarification. Matter of fact, I'm gonna do it like this. This is a question that's coming from Jason O'Rourke. I'm just blaming him for this question. All he said was well said, Doc, but this is what I read into that. He's asking, so you said in other faith organizations, if they want to become a certain, they want to become the president or they want to become a youth director, that they can say, I want to become a youth director. And that's perfectly fine. That's not seen as negative. That's a norm there. Jason, is that what you were trying to say? But in our context, if Jason were to say, I want to be the next, let's pick something benign, religious liberty coordinator for where is Jason? I think he's out in Central States Conference, that we would kind of side eye him on that or say that he's out of place. That's not how we do things. I guess what I want to ask is, so when an individual, particularly in this church, becomes a pastor, there's one thing that most do. Most will create a resume and they will send it out and they will say, I want to become a pastor, and these are the things that I believe qualify me to become a pastor. We're saying that we're okay with that, but we are not okay with anything beyond that.
Yeah, I'm trying to navigate your question because it has a degree.
It's Jason's question, so blame it on him.
Let me back it down. and also always good to see Jason. In fact, Jason is in the Central States area, but he works for one of the Adventist health systems out there, and so always good to see you, Jason. So Jason's question, yes, sir. Okay, that's a more personal. He's been political.
That's right.
So I don't think you put in your resume, I'm a great politician. I think you come to the table with a good organizational awareness, and you're able to work the processes in order to get things done, at least how you see it, along with others who may join you in seeing it a certain way. There is nothing inherently wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with saying I'm interested in a particular position. But because we take that more restrictive way of seeing things, by default, we make it political. Because it make it unhealthy political, because we are so coy in calling it what it is in terms of one's interests and one's desire to have things turn out a different way. And so that's why I go back to that original statement. It's the character of the person that comes to the table as a leader that uses politics, getting things done. That's going to determine the purity of it. If they have a low character, they will corrupt the environment no matter what they do.
So let's take Stephanie's question on this.
But I want to say this. I want to jump in and say this right here. Another leader shared with me when I was now getting into ministry, talked about the fact that being a pastor is one of those things where you're not going to be a pastor all the time. Are you just going to be a drone where you just constantly do the same thing over and over? There needs to be some kind of aspiration that you have. And when you look at your organization, there are some things you say, hey, I won't mind trying my hand at that. I won't mind doing that. And he shared with me, it's all right to have those aspirations and even express those aspirations. And so because you just don't want to constantly just be, I got to make the donuts. I got to make the donuts. I got to make the donuts. You want to become the donut shop owner sometime. And so I think that as you're sharing, Dr. Russell, Pastor Russell, is that we tend to not want to say those things because our community in which we live in, or the community in which we are working in, tends to think that if you have any kind of ambition or any kind of inspiration, you something's wrong with you. That false humility is not within you, or humility is not in you. How would you advise young preachers who have looked at this church and have said, you know what, if I can't be who I am, then I don't want to be a part of this? How would you advise them in light of what we know and what you're sharing with us today?
Well, first of all, we have a generation, a millennial generation of pastors that I think Dion will be close to there, and Anselm, that they are deciding on their own. They are not coming in for
what
years
happened to
and
me?
years. I'm sorry.
You gave it to them. No, I'm just kidding. I know I'm much older than my two other hosts. Well, not that much older. But I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disrupt.
I'm inimitable. Remember that.
Yes.
I like it.
Well, you have a mindset that is a growth mindset, and their desire to stay around and make the so-called donuts year after year is not happening. You see more and more of them who are pivoting to do ministries beyond the church. That's not a bad thing. It's just that there's only so many positions that we have in the church. That funnel becomes very thin as it goes up. And one of the unhealthy things that can arise is we begin to see others as our competitors. And so sometimes you want to show your hand because others can wait at you before you have the intersection and knock you out. And so it means you must be sensitive to your environment and how to communicate that. Now, with all of that said, let me say this. It is true, and no matter how like a hackneyed phrase it may sound, it is true that your gifts will make room for you. They do. And I think one comes in, and wherever they serve, they are all in. They're giving it their best year in and year out. They're becoming very creative. They're demonstrating their leadership. And it's amazing is that does begin to rise to the top. It's not automatic. There's no straight line for leadership in our church that you go here, 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 and all of a sudden you end up there. It doesn't happen. And so all one can do is give it their best year after year. And where you can communicate an interest with leaders above you who are secure to hear that, sometimes they can open strategic doors at strategic points to expose you. Let me give you something that's happening. How do you view it in Northeastern right now? I think with Abraham coming in, one of the things he did was not only to get folk on the first level of a departmental director here and an officer here, but he has reached into his organization and he's bringing young guys on as associate secretary, associate this, associate that. And you can read it in a overtly negative political way, or you can read it that he is creating a bench for the future that says they're getting exposure in order to, when the bell does ring, if it rings, they're ready to step in without a huge learning curve. They have some orientation and some exposure to this already. That's my thoughts on that.
Wow.
Great. Wow. Well, listen, I want to go back because I thought Stephanie asked a very pointed and I think something that it kind of keeps coming up, but we and I'm just saying in general that we haven't really focused on in many of our contexts. There are some conference contexts where it's different, but she says how do constituents know leaders at the conference level are qualified? Many times, and I know, speaking from my own experience, you've got delegates from churches from all over the conference who come for a weekend. They sit in a big auditorium. They elect a nominating committee. The nominating goes in the back somewhere, and they bring out a name that for whatever office, let's say the president's office. There may be a large portion of those delegates who have never even heard of that individual, or they don't know what other options exist. And so they will vote that name either up and down. They haven't seen a resume. All they're going on is either if it's an incumbent, what they have done before, and that's even if they've been paying attention. But it's like a lot of times, and this is a real struggle for me. I remember, one of my larger churches that I've pastored, we had so many delegates, because of our membership. We had 700 something members, so we had a gaggle of delegates, and it was the hardest thing for me to get delegates. The people in the church who you thought had a good grasp of what was going on and could be some of the better minds and new people throughout the conference, when they were nominated to be delegates to the session, these were the ones who were consistently saying, I decline, decline, decline. And so the delegates that we ended up sending were delegates that was their first time being in the environment. They didn't really know people outside the walls of of our own church. And they kind of went in wide-eyed and, really didn't really know what, so much what to expect or what was going on. And as I talked to my colleagues, they were saying that they were finding the same thing, that it was hard to find delegates who even wanted to go because of the way that the thing was constructed. They were voting blindly. They felt like they were just there to just kind of stamp what somebody else said and go home. And it felt more like a farce than I'm going to get in trouble for that. It just did not feel like it was really a legitimate, the people selecting a leader. So the other part of Stephanie's thing was, let me scroll back here. She said, the constituency, well, that's what she's saying. The constituency is voting blindly. Is there a way to overcome that? Or have I misread that?
You just went
I missed the last part of it. Yeah.
I said, is there a way to overcome that? Or did I just misread what happens? And I know that doesn't happen in every field in the same way. I know different conferences do things different ways. But in most of my context, that's been the scenario.
Hey, we got to come here by Hayden Edwards. I've been a delegate 3 times, never again. It's rigged. It's chaotic.
Well, you've hit the weakness of our system. And that is, it becomes a popularity contest. It becomes who knows who. It becomes who's influencing you, where there is no opportunity, as you have just referenced, to really get a sense of those who are standing for office at this time. Plus, how do you do that also in our church, where you may have an incumbent who is seeking re-election? How do you put out there the other people who are interested? It's such everything, we have created a system where to open it up seems unseemly. It seems unspiritual, really, when it isn't at all. And ultimately, God's hand will be in it, who gets there. But we got to find a much more, here's a word, transparent way to do this, because of a person who has served in a position, their name is coming back up for re-election, doesn't always mean they're the best person, because we don't know who else is out there. Right. And we assume, we also created a system that to have someone else out there, also the person who's incompetent, they're just trying to be political. Well, politics goes both ways, on this thing. But yeah, we have a system that creates sometimes the unseemliness of the political environment, as opposed to being a lot more transparent. I'm saying that twice, but the transparency has to become to the fore. How to do that? That's going to require a whole mind shift in our church to get there on that one. And I'm not sure how to even create the path for that conversation.
Mm.
Well, we have one of our viewers, Dr. Richards, Warren Richards, shares a comment. He says the book of Acts gives us the solution to the dilemma. We need to revise our system to allow the nominating committee to bring two names to the floor, allow the nominees to do a presentation before the body, and then let the constituency vote for one of the two. That's a very pragmatic and practical way of doing it, but I'm not sure. Are we ready for that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, I think different fields do things very differently, and so we know that it can be done because we know that different ways and different methods can be used because we are seeing them now. I watched, many of us watched, what was it? Potomac conference session online. They put their entire session online. We saw that there was a nominating committee that sat well before this session was called, and they had nominees, and they sent out resumes or dossiers or whatnot on the individuals that the people would be voting on. I have never, in my experience, seen anything like that anywhere that I have pastored. So those are some things that I think we can borrow from some systems that are out there. And it's like we don't have to recreate the wheel. So I would be very curious to see some people that are in different, that they run those things differently than in my context, getting their feedback on how do they feel about the systems. Are there holes that they find that they could poke in their systems? But I think that one from Acts, I'm gonna have to go read Acts again because I haven't seen the two people coming up.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
In the community,
Yeah.
So let's move on a little bit here. We just have a few more moments left to share, but there is this concept. We have been talking about the leader. We've been talking about the qualification of the leader. But one of the things when you speak to certain leaders, when I speak to the pastor per se, there's this concept of the style of leadership that we see at the top of our organization. They call it the plantation-style leadership. What's your take on the plantation-style leadership? Is there any pros or cons, or is it just all cons? What's your take on plantation-style leadership?
But before Pastor Freddie, Pastor Russell answers that question, let's unpackage this plantation-style leadership a little bit.
Please.
Pastor May. Let's unpackage it. You can't look the president in the eye. The president tells you to jump, you jump, and you just say how high. You made an example. Yeah. Well, I don't want to say can't pitch. But oftentimes you have good intentions, but yet because you may be up and running, maybe the master feels threatened and makes you an example, so that you can have an honest conversation with the president. And so, that's my take on this style of leadership. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I would like to add something that I have experienced recently is the concept of the family moving when the spouse does not have a job, does not have retirement, does not have any future because the pastor has been moving from call to call, and there has not been any kind of accommodation made for the spouse, and there's an expectation you got to move. If you don't move, you're not. You may not be in position, or you may have to find jobs somewhere else. Those are some of the things that seems as if it's our way or the highway kind of thing. That's what I'm talking about in terms of the plantation style, where your opinion as the worker, the frontline worker, tends not to have any kind of weight or opportunity to be expressed, but simply you do it this way, or you're no longer employed.
Yeah, well, we talk about keeping this relevant, resourced, and real. Here's the other part of that, that it's where a differing opinion or a dissenting vote merits discipline. And that discipline is a move where you've got to uproot your family and everything from a district and go to the tiniest district out in the, boonies somewhere. And that's not because your skill set is what's matched up to that district. It's because you voiced a differing opinion or you had a dissenting vote. And sometimes those things seem, it's hard. That kind of stuff is hard to prove, but I know a dozen preachers who could say it sure enough felt that way as to why I got moved when I moved. They didn't move me until that differing opinion or dissenting vote was cast. Well, so those are some things I think that also define, I think, for many people what that plantation leadership style feels like.
Well, the good news is that type of leader is a dying breed, both literally and figuratively. That type of leader is moving and dying off the scene. There is still some vestiges of that type leader in the church, but eventually the people themselves rise up and they remove that leader off. Let me shift it just a bit. Let me give a more euphemistically palatable term. The old command and control way of operating, as opposed to plantation, where it goes my way, I determine it, you do this, is also not dying, but is being modified because depending upon the context, sometimes in crisis, command and control is needed. Sometimes in situations, you got to be out there. But for the most part, there's a bit more adaptive way of leading today that recognizes the intelligence and the value of people on your team bring around you. When I first started pastoring, I had a president who shall remain nameless, that he told us what kind of car to get. He sent us down to the dealership where to buy that. And he told me and my colleague in the room that day, he says, I won't imitate him because you'll figure out who it was, that you guys are half heads. You're not full heads yet. And so you don't move, you don't breathe, you don't do anything unless I tell you. Wow. And of course, I was part of the vanguard of the transitioning of mindset coming in. My generation was coming in. And unbeknownst to the leader, when he told us that, he was on his last go round. And the very thing that was his strength in years previous ended up being the weakness and the very thing that undermined him on his leadership that caused a premature end to it because of that plantation type thinking. And of course, most leaders learned that from their predecessors. We had in our church at one point this potentate type leader. This LOI calls it kingly power, where it went your way. You do what I tell you to do. And of course, all that did was great harm to the Church of God. But some folks thought that was how you did it, and they duplicated it when it became leaders. And it's just now, in the last, I think, 10 or 15 years, that we're seeing a radical shift away from that type of leadership. We have a little more subtle part of that now, of where people can begin to manipulate outcomes through getting other folk to go against you along with them. That becomes a little more insidious and a little more difficult to interpret if it's happening to you.
Wow.
Wow.
All right.
Command and control. I like that.
I like that.
I like that. I could live with that in terms of not the plantation and maybe it's because I was in the South that we came up with plantation, but the command and the control. So you in your sharing, you kind of shared that there is a positiveness, there's a pro in that style of leadership, and as opposed to it being negative.
Well, today a lot of folk are turning towards leader as coach. That's the way that is where leadership is tilting towards your ability to coach for development, to be a coach for your people. And I'm not talking about a formal executive coach where you're sitting down for an hour or two. We're talking about you're coaching in the flow of the day or the context that you're leading your people. But with this new form or this new thinking of leadership, leader as coach, what you don't do is throw out everything else, because there is a place for command and control. If a bomb is about to be dropped on the U.S., we don't want Joe Biden trying to get a consensus at that point. He needs to make a call in the urgency of the moment. There are times, again, where command and control is still needed. But the more coaching approach, the more coaching for development and coming alongside of your people is more of the optimal way over the long haul. It's like an evangelist. Evangelists are known to be notorious bastards, because remember, their thing is, thus saith the word, Lord, here's what we're going to do, and you follow the Lord right here and there. But when they pastor a church, they will kill it. Those same folks they brought in are out in 3 months, because you can only take that style before the agility of a leader to bring into play a number of different styles relative to the situation is the optimal way to go today. And that means they're constantly growing in order to deploy those styles as needed.
That's a great segue into our next question, and we're just going to move away, but there's some tangentialness there. Let's talk about, Pastor Russell, the role of the leader as a learner, and then his role in really coaching or in developing other leaders. So what do we know about the value of the leader also being a learner, and then that leader's role in developing other leaders?
I like to use this illustration. Either you're doing this in life, progressing, or you're retrogressing. As a leader, there is nothing called maintain. And if you were to open the dictionary and you try to find the word maintain, and you saw something that looked like that word, it is only a mirage, because you can't maintain. You're either growing or you're not growing, which means, number one, that a leader has to be a reader. They have to be constantly finding ways for how to grow themselves. They got to constantly be finding conferences they can go to. They have to be on the lookout to interact with people that are growing. So as an example, I have a lot of acquaintances, but my inner circle are people who grow, because people that grow spend time with people who are growing.
Wow.
If you round people all the time who are woe is me and they're all negative and this is bad, you take on that same mindset. So as a pastor, as a leader, there's not been one point in my career that I've not invested in my own growth. I never franchise out my growth to the conference, where I only got growth by going to a pastor's meeting or a church-based meeting. I invested in my own growth. We built it into our family budget, books, family budget, a conference or two a year. And when you are intent on being the best you can be, in the Lord Jesus Christ, you're constantly looking out for ways to grow and around people that grow. Maxwell taught me something some years ago, 20, 25 years ago. I learned a lot about him, from him initially. And John Maxwell used to share that he would see people he wanted to grow from, and he will offer them $100 for 30 minutes of their time. Given inflation, we'll hire today, but back then, $100 is a lot of money. And he says they always gave him the time, and that there was never once where they took the money, because people who are trying to grow don't mind helping others who want to grow. So I turned around and I did it, and that was true. That I came alongside 3 or 4 people that I wanted to grow by, folk who are in the church and beyond the church, major players, and every single time they gave me the time and never took the money. So I had a little young lady come to me one time, and he says, he heard me tell this, he says, I'll give you $100 for 30 minutes of your time. I said, boy, I will take the money. You need to know that.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
But the fact is, I think you find those in your life who are growing. Last night, I was on the phone with an international leader last night. If I call their name, you would know them. And they come from a spiritual context, so they're a good Friday night conversation. But I just sat and I just listened as they were just downloading in me as I watch and observe their leadership. When I go to the house, I go to their library to see what they're reading. When they talk about the conferences they're going to,
Yes.
when they talk about when you are listening in their conversations, this iron sharpens iron that you guys are all about with the Pastors Roundtable, that is how you grow. Because either you're in this or you're doing this. And unfortunately, you do have leaders where it fudges out on them that they're not kept up, they're not grown, and they're speaking stuff from 25 years ago, operating out of their right brain as opposed to their left brain. Let me give you an example. Those who operate out of their right brain usually focus on their memories of what they did in the past. Those out of the left brain are always looking towards the future. What is coming down the pike?
Wow.
And when you reach the place where you can only talk about your memories and not your present and your future, then you a clear demonstration that you're not growing, and it fudges out
Mercy.
at some point.
Listen, Doc, oh man, you are dropping a lot of gems here with us. If we had some more time, I would like to talk to you a little bit more about Miracle Temple. You pastored that church, you developed leaders from that church, and how was that process? How did you we talked about the spirituality being number one, seeking God, where you sought God and God blessed. What was that experience like? What are some of the things that you utilize so that church can grow to be where it was when you were, there at Miracle Temple?
Well, we were surrounded by a lot of great leaders on the pastoral team. One of those leaders I saw a while ago who was watching this, and that is Orville Brissett. Orville pastors the Germantown Church in the Philadelphia metropolitan area. He and his wife, Tiffany, there she is, right there, just popped up. He represented some great leaders who came on board that allowed that church to push forward. Both local leaders who we spent a lot of time pouring into, creating that leadership community, but the type of leaders who came on the pastoral staff pushed it forward. The thing with Miracle Temple, it was a point in time of where it was needed in the church. When I first went there, Alvin Kibble, who was the president of the conference that I had just gone to, Allegheny East, was telling me, he said, "Freddie, I believe this church can be one of the fastest growing churches in Baltimore. I believe it could be on the cutting edge." And at that point, the church was sitting in a building that was built in 1866, a year after the American Civil War. It had about 85, 90 people in a poor section of the city, one of the poorest churches in Allegheny East Conference. And a pastor arrived in that era, which is me, who needed to be humble. And I came in very arrogant in the sense of that, why would they send me the Miracle Temple? Because up to that point, I had moved very quickly in my ministry of where at 28 years old, I was sitting in the third largest church of the conference, in my old conference, in Allegheny West Conference. And I was on this trajectory that I thought I was hot stuff. And then the Lord allowed me to accept the call, Brenda and I, to go to Miracle Temple. I discovered on the first day, never accept a church sight unseen. And we accepted that church in the middle of the winter in 1996, little small kids, and we came to the church on the coldest, snowiest day in decades in the Washington, Baltimore metropolitan area, should I say. And I was just really depressed that day. First of all, Alvin didn't show up to introduce me because he couldn't get through the snow from Pine Forge. So I had to introduce myself. And on that first Sabbath, I was ready to leave because only about 25 folk in the audience that weekend. The little kid who was playing the organ, a guy named George, he was 15 years old. Every song that George played sounded like the last song that George played. It was filler music the whole way. My wife is sitting in the back of the church. My two little kids are sitting back there. And the back of the church was not that far. They had this look in their eyes like, "Daddy, what did you do?" And so I managed to get through that first service. And that evening, Alvin showed up along with the pastors from around Baltimore to do the installation. So snow had slowed down. We're downstairs because the church is on the second floor, the fellowship hall, and the pastors are coming in, and Alvin is trying to talk me up. Freddie, I really believe this church can go. And I'm on the verge of cussing my new conference president out, literally, because how could you send me here? What were you thinking, Alvin? What that you would do? You know where I was sitting. Why'd you call me over here to put me here? And the pastors came in, and I didn't know any of them. They're shaking my hand like you have our condolences. So you're the sucker that put up in this church right here, man. And so at the end of this whole thing, we got back to our hotel that night. And when Brenda put the kids to bed, I began to cry, literally, and she began to pray. My ego was all over the place, and I had no idea that I was about to have an encounter with God.
Mercy.
Where I was going through a spiritual paradigm shift. 3 days later, my wife and kids had gone back to Ohio to get packed up. I had stayed in the city a few more extra days to try to continue to look for housing. And around that Wednesday, I went to the office for the first time. The office is a quote marks because it was really a row house beside the church. And I walked into this cold row house, and Baltimore is a city of row houses, but the row houses where our church was had seen their better days. And I walked into that building. It was freezing, had radiator heat, and radiator heat. Dion and Anselm and Roger may not know about radiator heat. It's steam heat. That means you turn it on Monday, it may get warm by Friday. It's not going to warm up while you're there. I went upstairs to the second floor to my office, and I walked in for the first time. They had these huge windows with no window dressings. It was just grime and filth on those windows. On my desktop was roach shavings on my desktop. I pulled the drawer open, and there was rat droppings inside the drawer. And I went to the window to look down, and I'm crying at this point that God, why would you send me here? And when I looked down, insult was added to injury, that the snow had begun to melt a bit, and there was garbage everywhere. And I remember those words of Nehemiah when he said, the people saw the rubbish and they were discouraged. I was discouraged. And I got very arrogant. I said to the Lord, I said, God, the only thing I'm going to do here is preach a few sermons, run some meetings here and there, and 2 years I'm out of here. I'm not staying. And for the first time in my life, I heard God audibly speak to me. And I suspect that he had tried to speak before, but I didn't have the reverential or circumcised ears that Jeremiah talked about. And I heard the Lord audibly say to me, no, you will not. And I broke down in tears. And I asked God something that I had never asked before. I did not have anything, Anselm, in my past that would even bring this type prayer to mind. And Dion, I'm not sure where the prayer came from, Roger, at all. And here was the prayer. I'm standing, filthy office, rat droppings, rope shavings, dirty windows, garbage, no hope or optimism about that church at all. And here's what I said to the Lord. I lifted my hands to God for the first time. And I said, God, if you give me a vision for this place, I would give it all that I got.
Come on now.
And as opposed to spending 2 years there, I spent 12 and a half years in that church, where it became the fastest growing church in the division. We went from a little over 100 on Sabbath morning to over 700 on Sabbath morning. It went from a tithe of 100,000 to over 1 million. And people keep always ask, what was the driver of that? Well, the driver of that is when I finally began to understand something I learned at the Brooklyn Tabernacle that Earl started, and I went up one Tuesday to visit. That my house must be called a house of prayer, not a house of potluck, not a house of concerts, but a house of prayer. And when I went to Brooklyn Tab that first time with Earl started, I came back As we drove down the New Jersey Turnpike, come back to Baltimore, I was talking to God all the way back. I said, Lord, if you get me back to Miracle Temple in Baltimore, it would never be the same. And I began to emphasize the place of prayer meeting as the central driver of our church.
Yes.
And we went from 8 to 15 on Wednesday evening till we were up to 400 to 500 on Wednesday evening for prayer meeting.
Wow.
The average age was 28 to 30 years old. Some of my favorite Wednesday nights was when Orville would preach. Orville, even back then, would bring a word that would blow me away as to just his own point nature of his preaching. Alex Royce, my first associate down in Florida. Paula Olivier, who is now a youth director up in
Mercy.
Northeastern.
Northeastern. Yes.
My first white pastor. All of these young adults were just Gamal Alexander. All of them were awesome. Courtney Ray, awesome. And they bought into this thing.
Yeah.
My house should be called a house of prayer.
Yes.
And people keep asking, what happened? I said, we got to the place where we kept the main thing as the main thing. We baptized more people at a prayer meeting than any other service.
Wow.
We have people, we have these young adults bringing their colleagues from their offices to prayer meeting, and the atmosphere of God was all over the place. And and God did something that when he got me out the way, when he humbled me, and sometimes the Lord has to take you down in order to bring you back. And I'm so grateful that on that morning in that cold office where I was so discouraged and depressed and arrogant, that God took me down and gave me a chance to not to stay at that church 2 years, but to stay there 12 and a half years, the best 12 and a half years of my life.
Wow. Wow. What he was doing, he was not giving you skill and understanding. He wasn't.
Absolutely.
He was giving you character. He was working on character, which brings us full circle. That's the thing that when we look at leaders, or when we look for leaders, or when we try to be leaders, that's my takeaway today, is that God is still trying to transform character. Just awesome. Man, thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
I want to take this opportunity. I probably never said it publicly, Dr. Russell, Pastor Russell, a good friend of mine, Freddie. I remember Innovative Impact. I was in California.
Right.
And I flew to Baltimore and sat at the feet of those of you and those others that you had there. And it was a life changer, a game changer in ministry for me. And since then, you and I have had a standing conversation. Every time I change a role, I call and say, hey, what do I need to be listening to? I have not forgotten that. And you have been gracious. I didn't offer the $100, but you still took the opportunity to hear my plea and share with me what will help in my ministry. And I just want to say thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you publicly for what you have done and what you have shared here on Pastors Roundtable for others to hear and possibly begin to do, so that they too can develop their character, so they can be better leaders. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. And by the way, Roger, on the money, Roger, it's not too late. There is still time.
There's still time. Well, Pastor Russell, listen, man, like so many of us, we've just been following you and seeing what God has been doing through you, and the power of prayer. The power of prayer, man, that is so awesome to know that you have kept the main thing, and that is praying. So again, man, just a wonderful time with you. Thank you so much for coming on. And man, listen, we need to have you. We need to have you for like a series, you know.
Can I got to throw this out there as well, since Raj did that, and I'm feeling. I remember, Pastor Russell, you came and did a workers meeting for Southeastern Conference, and I think this is either while you were at Allegheny West or at Berean. I'm not quite sure what the time frame was for you, but I was pastoring, I believe, your sister-in-law at the time, in Tampa, Florida. And so I knew your name. I had been to Innovative Impact, and I knew this, guru leadership was coming. And I remember Roger saying to him after one of our sessions, Doc, man, I got some ideas. I need some feedback. I just want to bounce them off of you. And you said to me, Pastor Russell, yeah, anytime. And I said, okay, when? Because I wanted to press the issue. You said, how about breakfast? And I said, bet, I'm there. 5 o'clock. And out of my mouth was, yep, I'm there, 5 a.m. On the inside, I was like, wait a minute, hold up, 5 a.m. But you took the time to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to come and sit and listen to me bounce my ideas off of you, and the feedback and the counsel that you gave me. And from that day forward, we've been in touch over the years, and you've been willing to pour into me, and I funnel my money through Roger for those sessions when you just pour into me. And I just, again, the same thing as Roger, I say thank you. And as I listened to Roger, I couldn't help but think how many pastors, because you make me feel like I'm the only one that you're doing this for and doing this with. And it's just a special quality of leader that is willing to do that for younger pastors and pastors that are coming behind. And so just on behalf of myself and my other colleagues that you have poured into over the years, we say thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you, man. That's very encouraging. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Yes. Tremendous.
Listen, we also want to say to our viewers, listen, the Pastors Roundtable, I mean, if you have an idea, a suggestion, let us know, because we are growing together. We do want to have a shout out to Dr. John Mills. Man, what a wonderful job you're doing, helping us out writing the questions. And I must admit too, I'm looking in the comments and I see my mom in the comments too. Pastor Wade, she's catching up, man.
Right. Boom, there she is.
There you go.
Mom,
Sister Gertrude Henry. What a testimony.
Yes, right.
To God be praised.
Sister Gertrude Henry, so we praise God, for that as well.
Well, again, Dr. Russell, thank you so much again for your time today. I know you have a lot on your plate, and for you to, when we talked about setting this up, we had some conflicts and some dates, but we settled on this date, and you said, I'm going to be there. And I just want to say thank you. You have exuberated. Not only you have exuberated everything you shared about leadership today, you practice, you actually do it. There's no question about it. You are what you walk the talk. I want to say so. Thank you again for that. I want to say thank you on behalf of our viewers. I know our viewers, some of them are upset. They didn't know we were going to be on. Oops. But they're going to be able to watch it in the replay. They'll watch it in the replay. But again, thank you so much for being here at the Pastors Roundtable. On next week, we will be back again at Pastors Roundtable. That is the plan. But we want to let you know that on Christmas, the 25th, we are going to take some time off and be with our families on that Sabbath on the 25th. And so we will not have a Pastors Roundtable episode on that Sabbath. But stay tuned as we continue to share from different ideas and different opportunities to share about ministry and structure and where the church is going and the church we love. I think everyone on this call here, on this program, loves the church, and so we're going to do everything we can to share that and show that.
Yeah. Just before we go, I know we had a conversation about providing some other content. Dr. Henry, Pastor Wade, and I, we've come together to provide this content, these conversations to talk about mission and structure and how they intersect. But deep down in each of us, this may come across as just something. We're ministers, and our passion is to see relationships with Jesus Christ grow deeper and grow stronger. And so we've talked about the possibility of on our group page, maybe providing when we have guests like Dr. Russell or others, just giving, putting up in those spaces, 5-10 minute devotional during the week that just might give you some extra juice to go on during the week. And so we'd like to kind of gauge your interest in that. Dr. Henry is he's great here on the roundtable, but you got to hear him preach when he opens the Word and he gets into the text. And the same with Pastor Wade. I've had both of them speak for my church, and so what we're doing right now is what we do on the side, but our heart is in ministry, and so we're interested to know if you would be interested in some other type of content that we provide for you in that area that may be of benefit to help you grow. So if you're interested in seeing some other content, just drop us a line. Let us know. Matter of fact, let's just have you do something simple. If something like that would be of interest to you, just drop a 1, just the number 1 in the chat, and that will just kind of help us get a gauge for where you are on that. And again, thank you, our audience, so much for being here week after week, for sharing and for engaging in these conversations. We look forward to seeing you in our chat every week, and so thank you so much for your support.
I was going to say, Pastor Paul, we are preachers, man, because we everybody had a little ending here, man. We could go, brother. Listen,
yeah, we can. That's what we do.
No, we are preachers, man. I love it. I love the Pastors Roundtable, man.
Yeah.
My colleagues here at the Pastors Roundtable. So God bless you all. Roger, you're gonna take us out.
Wait, hold on. I gotta give this caveat that outro thing is not working today, so we're not gonna be able to cut to that other screen. So we just when we out, we're just out today.
Okay, that's right.
So listen, we are just so happy to be a part of this ministry, Pastors Roundtable, where we strive to make ministry relevant,
resourced,
and real. God bless.
Take care, everybody.
God bless.